we go. User ID is 1, 2, 3, 4. There are a couple of things I don't like here. Primarily, I can already see how this will get, too confusing to work with. Because the way routing works inside of Next.js is using folder or file-based routing. What I prefer for my backend is code-based routing. And I have this great example if it's still not clear to you what that means. This is from 10-stack router. We're not going to be using 10-stack router. I just found this random post in their documentation, and I think it's a great example. So this is file-based routing. It's basically what we're doing, right? Instead of routes folder, we have an API folder, and then we have, reserved file names inside of that. So that's how you create, API routes inside of Next.js. But I prefer this for my backend. I'd rather just simply define what I want to, the file of my route, and then specifically define the path, how to access that route. For example, post ID edit. This makes more sense to me and it's kind of easier to work with, especially on the backend side. So on the front end, I'm okay with file-based routing, but on the back end, I highly prefer this way of working. So I'm going to close this for now. That's the first issue that I have with this. The second issue that I have is param interference. So as you can see, nothing is telling me that user ID will be a part of this route. So I know that I'm looking for user ID here because I named this folder user ID, but there is so much room for error here. For example, let's say I forgot to capitalize ID and I search for this now. Let's see what happens. As you can see, my user ID no longer exists, right? So that's what I'm trying to showcase to you. It's not strictly typed, and this is a very big issue for me when creating something that's supposed to be, a scalable API route. And the reason, that's also the reason why instead of using this native API routes from Next.js, we are going to override that system using Hono. And if you're wondering what is Hono, well, Hono is a web application framework. And the easiest way to explain what it is and what it does is Express, right? So if you've ever worked with Express, you can imagine Hono as Express. I personally prefer Hono. I think it's definitely a new technology. It's still to be, tested by these huge companies. Express is definitely battle tested and used by millions. But Hono is new and definitely growing. It has a great author behind it, and it's also supported, as at least from my understanding, from the team from Cloudflare. So definitely something to look out for. And I use Hono personally in my production products, so I'm pretty confident to teach you about Hono. So great thing about Hono is that you can use it standalone in a bunch of different frameworks. So you can use it, let's go ahead and zoom in a bit so you can see. You can use it on Cloudflare, Fastly, Dino, Bun, AWS, or Node.js, or Vercel. So you can deploy it on all of those things. And the coolest thing, if you ask me, is that you can easily include it inside of Next.js. So I'm going to go ahead and search for Vercel here. And there we go. Now you can see how we can create our API routes using Hono inside of Next.js. So we're going to skip this part because we already have our app running. So what we're going to do is we're going to visit our terminal here, and I'm just going to do bun add, or in your case, if you're using npm install, not Vercel, but Hono. And let's see if we need anything else. I'm not sure if I need Hono/Vercel. I think this comes from Hono package. So now we're going to create this API route in the app folder, API, and then we're going to create this special kind of looking folder. So let's see what that is. And here's another cool thing about this whole system that we're doing. You can have both native routes in Next.js and API routes from Hono. So you don't have to choose between one or another. You can have both of them. If for any reason Hono doesn't support some very specific thing that you need in Next.js, completely fine. You can still create normal API routes. But let's go ahead and let's do this. Inside of our API folder, we're gonna go ahead and create a catch-all folder, and we're gonna spread a route inside of it. So this is again a special kind of folder similar to this, which is a constant folder, and similar to our auth, which is a route group. So it's important that you put double brackets inside, and it's important that you spread the constant inside like this. And then inside, create a route.ts file. And now let's go ahead and let's import Hono from Hono, and let's import handle from Hono Vercel. And now let's go ahead and create a const app to be new Hono. Base path will be /API because we are in the /API folder here. And now let's simply do app.get /hello. And inside of here, let's go ahead and let's return this context, hello world. So pretty much the same thing we did in the beginning. And what we have to do now is, remember, the way routes work in Next.js is by having specific exports of get, post, put, patch. So right now, that's what we are missing here. So what we can do, what Hono allows us to do, is to export const get, and we just use this handle wrapper around our app instance right here, and that's it. The get route is now overwritten and will redirect to Hono. So let's go ahead and check this out now. So if I go to my API /hello, there we go, hello world. And the coolest thing about this is that I can now do code-based routing. So I can, for example, do, let's say, project/project ID like this. And I can return c.json project, and let's for now just write project ID like this. So now I can go to /API/project/123, and there we go. Now it says project ID, and now let's actually destructure the project ID. So destructuring the param is as simple as params or project ID to be c.param. My apologies, c.request.param, and this is the coolest thing. It actually inferred the project ID from my URL, which I've written here. So if you remember that little problem we had, let's first just confirm this works, right? So I'm just gonna pass this project ID here. I'm gonna refresh, and there we go. You can see that now it says project ID 123 here. And the cool thing is, if I make a mistake, for example, and make this a lowercase, and let's go ahead and see why isn't it throwing an error. It should be throwing an error. I just think I'm using a different way. For example, I think that I can do, let me just find a different way I can do it, which I just want to showcase that little problem that we had. It can actually be fixed with Hono. It can be using cRequest param like this, and inside of here, there we go. So if I were to make this a capital, there we go. Now we get the error. So yeah, if you use the first way, which we did, you won't exactly get the error. Why won't you get the error? Well, because you are specifically looking for this, right? It doesn't matter that it doesn't exist. But if you don't specify which param you're looking for, and instead you destructure the project ID, you can see that it can only be exactly what's written in the URL. So that's what I wanted to showcase to you. And this is how I want to build my API routes. So that's why we added Hono. I think it's absolutely great, and it supports Next.js. So let's clean this up a bit. Let's remove the test folder from here. Let's remove the users from here, and let's simply continue to work inside of API route.ts right here. So for this chapter, I want to stop here, and I want you to maybe play around and explore Hono a bit for yourself, right? Because what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and add app rights. So I want to give you a chance to play around with Hono. Go ahead through the documentation page, learn about the motivation, why it was made, and learn about how this whole amazing, project ID param interference actually works. So you can learn a lot here. So I would highly suggest you go ahead and just, take a peek at the documentation. It's very well written. I've learned a lot just by looking at the documentation here. And in the next project, we're going to go ahead and extend Hono even further by adding something called RPC. So you can read about this feature as well if you're interested in what that is. Great job. Now that we have Hono set up, let's add TanStack query, or previously known as React query, to our project. And we're going to use that in combination with Hono to get an end-to-end type-safe request. You're going to see what I'm talking about just in a moment. You already saw, how great param interference work with Hono, and now imagine that extended all the way to the front end when you actually make that request. Because usually, when you write your fetch requests, let me go ahead, you would do something like fetch/projects, and then you would add, a project ID. Something like that. But none of this would actually warn you if your project ID is valid or not valid, or whether this route even exists, right? Now imagine that level of type safety from your backend to your frontend. So end-to-end type safety. That's what we are going to achieve with our setup now. So for that, we need TanStack React query. It is simply the best in business here. So this is the current highest version at the moment of me making this tutorial, so 5.59.0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do bun add at TanStack/React query at 5.59.0. You can use the latest if you want to. I rarely see React query having any breaking changes, but I'm giving you this overview just so you know the exact version I will be having. Great, we now have this, and what we have to do now is follow React query docs to install it inside of Next.js. And I would highly suggest that you right now open TanStack query, make sure your framework is chosen as React, make sure your version is chosen as latest right here, or version 5, which right now is the latest version. We just installed version 5, right? So inside of the documentation page here, I want you to go into search, and I want you to search advanced server. And you should get advanced server rendering topic right here. Go ahead and click on that. And now you have a file that you have to copy and add in your project. Let's go ahead and let's copy this file. And let's go inside of source, inside of components, and let's create a query-provider.tsx. And let's paste everything inside. We have a couple of errors. We're going to resolve all of that. So if you want to, you can leave the comments so you understand what's going on here. Just make sure you don't have the errors here. You won't have any errors if you have the package installed. You don't have to modify these options. The only thing we're going to change is the following. We're going to create an interface called query provider props, and it's going to have children, which are a type of React node. And we're not going to export default. Instead, we're going to do const query provider, and we're going to turn this into an arrow function, and we're going to assign these props right here. There we go, like that. You don't have to modify anything further. And make sure you do export const. Yes, that is very important. So make sure you do export const query provider. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's go inside of app, inside of layout.tsx. And now we're going to add that right here. So I'm going to go ahead here and import our query provider from components query provider. And very simply, we're going to wrap our children around that. So query provider, like this. There we go. We now have our React query ready. And what I would like to do is just revisit my localhost 3000 here. Just ensure, that my project is still working. I'm going to visit some of the routes we have, like sign in. There we go. Everything seems to be working just fine. So what I want to build next is I want to go ahead and actually add app right. I want to set up app right using their console. And I want to create my very first hook, which will connect to Hono RPC, which we talked about just a few seconds ago. So this is what I want to do next. I want to go inside of source here, and I want to go inside of features, inside of auth. And inside of here, I'm going to create a new folder called server, like this. And inside of here, I'm going to create route.ts. And inside of here, I'm going to import Hono again from Hono. And I'm very simply going to do const app to be new Hono here, like that, and export default app. And inside of here, what we can do is we can go ahead and create a, for example, /login. We can do things like that. Let's get the context, and let's return c.json success. Okay. Just a placeholder for now. So we now have a post login here. So that's the cool thing. We don't have to write all of our API routes inside of here, because that would be quite convoluted as well, wouldn't it? We can separate them inside of our features right here. So now inside of our features out, we have components and we have the actual API routes for our authentication. Now, this specific login routes will also have to accept some fields, right? And there's a cool package which can help us in Hono to actually have type-safe values as well. That's right, not just the params, but also values. And this is, again, going to be end-to-end. From front-end to back-end, you will have full type safety, knowing that what you're passing from the front-end can 100% be accepted on your back-end. So let's go inside of our terminal here, and let's do bun add hono/zod-validator. And I just remembered that I didn't exactly show you my versions of this, but I guess you can see the version every time I install something. But let me just quickly revisit my package.json for you. Two important packages which I've added was Hono Zod validator here and Hono itself. So this is my Hono version. If you want to, in case you're having some big problems, in case Hono has changed a lot since the time, I made this tutorial, you can just downgrade to this specific version and you should have a relatively the same experience as I do. And we already have Zod installed when we developed our forms. So with this Hono Zod validator, we can now go ahead and create something called, a schema and a Z validator here. So every time we do a post request to /login, we're going to go ahead and add a middleware here. So what's a middleware? A middleware inside of, also inside of Express, but also inside of Hono, is basically anything which returns a next method before the final controller. So you can chain as many middlewares as you want before you do the final arrow function, which I like to call the controller, which is called the controller, and return back a value. So you can chain as many items in here that you want. But next is a reserved param, which all middlewares have, which you can then return, execute, and then that will fire the next middleware, and the next middleware, and finally the controller. And middlewares can be built by us, and we are gonna build some custom middlewares in this project, but we can also use some newly installed ones like the Z validator from @Hono Zod validator. So that is a type of middleware. And inside of this middleware, we define what to validate. In our case, we are validating our JSON field. And then in the second argument, we have to create a schema. So let's prepare our Zod here. And then what we would do is write z.object. And let me remove the extra comma which I have here. And inside of here, we're gonna accept an email, which is a d.string.email, and a password, which is a z.string, like this. And what I like to do is have my things ordered one beneath another. I just think it makes more sense like this. You can, of course, do it in whatever way you prefer or like. Great, so we have this now. Should I